Hello everyone, my name is Craig Protzel and I'll be joining all of you in DC on Thursday, February 27th to give a presentation on storytelling, specifically as it relates to startups, and also offer help with both your 2-minute lesson learned video and your 10-minute final presentation. After talking things over with Carl and the other iCore learning instructors, we thought it might be helpful to offer some initial instruction with regard to video production, and so I've put together this video to help get you started. With that in mind, the plan for this talk is to cover the main areas of actually making a video. In part 1, we'll be going over pre-production, or the initial planning phase. In part 2, we'll step through production, where content is created. And in part 3, we'll cover the basics of post-production, sometimes referred to as the editorial process. I'm going to spend more time in parts 1 and 2 and have plans to dive into much more detail about post-production when I see all of you in DC on the 27th. Now, before we can really get going, I'd like to pose this question. What is a good story? I know that's a pretty broad question, and it'll be a major component of my talk on the 27th, but it's important for us to get the conversation going. Now, if you haven't done so already, please take a few minutes and watch Ira Glass's Storytelling Part 1 of 4 on YouTube. The link should be in the syllabus right next to the link for this video. If you're not familiar with Ira Glass, he's the host of NPR's This American Life and is a masterful storyteller. His video offers us a nice foundation for the work we're going to do. Go ahead and watch the video. I'll wait here. Great, welcome back. So, according to Ira, a good story has 3 main parts. First, it's a sequence of causally related events. Second, it raises questions throughout the piece, making the viewer wonder what's going on. And third, it offers a moment of reflection, or as Ira says, informs us why we're even listening to this. So, I'd like you to keep these 3 points in mind as we move through the 3 parts of making a video. Okay, let's get going with part 1, pre-production. At the very beginning of starting to make a video, it's crucially important to ask yourself the following 5 questions. What is the subject? Who is the audience? What is the goal? What is the medium? And lastly, what's the emotion? And I'm going to go through each of these individually. When I say the subject, I'm essentially saying, what is this about? Are we talking about a moment? Is it a product? Is it a person, an event, a place, an idea? What is this video really going to be focusing on? Second, the audience. Who is this for? Is this something for customers? Is it for your peers? Is it going to be for investors, partners, engineers, designers? We really need to understand who you're making this for. Third, what's the goal? Are you trying to introduce something? Are you trying to convince? Are you trying to influence? Are you trying to teach? Are you trying to sell? What are you really trying to achieve here? Fourth, the medium, or rather, how is this going to be expressed? Is it going to be a live stream? Is it going to be recorded? Will this be posted online? Is there going to be a Q&A? Think about the context in which this video is going to be consumed. And lastly, maybe the most important, what is the emotion of the piece? Or rather, how should it feel? Should it be empowering, reassuring, thoughtful, inspiring? How do you want to make people feel after having watched this video? Now, after having answered those 5 questions, you're ready for the ideation phase. And this is really an opportunity to write down any ideas you might have, any experiences, any conversations that happen, any notable moments, whatever you think might be relevant for the piece. And some people like to do this with post-it notes on a wall. Other people like to create mind maps. Some people work well in a Google Doc. Other people just want to scribble on paper. Whatever makes sense for you and your group. But it's really an opportunity to get everything out and on paper and start to flesh out and figure out what really is your story. After having answered the 5 questions and spent some time ideating, you're really ready to create your story. And by your story, I'm referring to those 3 main elements that we talked about with regards to Ira Glass in his video, which are which sequence of events, what questions can we raise, and what's the meaning of all this? The nice part about having answered the 5 questions and done some ideation is that that'll also help inform some production decisions and some post-production decisions later on, such as music that you might want to choose, how long the piece should be, the pacing, and everything. So now that you've gotten a sense of what your story is, it's time to write your script. Now, a script usually contains 3 main components. The first is often referred to as copy. Copy could be narration, also known as a voiceover, or title cards. The second component is dialogue, and this is on-camera speaking. Maybe it's an interview with someone, maybe it's a moment that you captured on camera, but it's usually a person that's on camera speaking. And third, are visuals, basically which camera shots do you want to include in your piece. Here's an example script for you to look at. You can see there's copy, here referred to as the narrator. There's some dialogue where we have an expert speaking on camera. And there's a list of the visuals that are going to complement all of that audio. And essentially, this is providing you with the structure for your video. Once you have a script in place, it can be extremely helpful to lay out what's known as a storyboard. A storyboard is sometimes referred to as a blueprint, a visual shot list, or a paper prototype. Essentially, it's a visual way for you to represent your video. You can get an idea of which shots you're going to need to record, what angles, how they should look, and also what dialogue and sound complements any of those particular shots. Now that we've fleshed out what our story is, we've written a script, we've constructed a storyboard, we are ready for production. Production is sometimes referred to as the shooting phase or the filming phase, but regardless, production can get very complicated and overwhelming very fast. So there are a checklist of items that we need to cover, and those include a camera, lights, audio, and a category I'll call extras. Let's look at each of these individually. In terms of a camera, the question you need to ask yourself is, what makes sense? And oftentimes, the best camera is really the one you own, or the one you're the most comfortable with. You might want to use your smartphone or a high-end camera. It really depends. For this particular lessons learned video, it's totally fine to use your smartphone or even the onboard camera on your laptop. Next, let's talk about lights. It's important to ask yourself, what kind of light is involved in this video? Are we going to be shooting outside and as a result have to deal with weather changes? Are we going to be inside? And if we're inside, are there windows? Are there lights built into a room? Are there lights we can bring in to give it a certain feel? These are all questions you should ask yourself before you start shooting. In terms of audio, it's incredibly important to try to get the best sound quality possible. There's a saying that people will tolerate poor video quality, but they really won't tolerate bad audio. So you're welcome to use the microphone that's built into your phone or your laptop or your camera, but if you can get your hands on some sort of external audio recording device, it'll help immensely. Some examples of those are Zoom recorders, lavalier mics, or even a snowball mic that you can plug into your USB port on your laptop to record voiceover. Lastly, the extras category. This includes any sort of batteries or adapters you might need if you're running around shooting, any storage cards if you need to transfer media, headphones if you want to monitor sound while you're recording, a card reader if you need to actually get the video off of your card and onto a hard drive. A tripod can be immensely important. It'll help stabilize your shots and really improve the quality of the video. And lastly, I always like to bring a snack because production ends up taking way longer than I ever anticipate, and I get hungry, and it's hard to make decisions when you're hungry. So I recommend bringing a snack. All right, now that we've gone through the checklist of production elements, we're ready to start shooting our video. Traditional production suggests that for any particular shot, you get a wide angle, a medium angle, a close-up, and some B-roll, some kind of random shots in the area. This works pretty well for film and TV, but I actually prefer the BBC rule of 5. Now this is a rule that BBC has been teaching their journalists when they have to go out and record some of their stories on video, usually with their phones. And the BBC rule of 5 suggests that in any particular moment shot, you get a tight shot of your subject's hands, a tight shot of your subject's face, a medium shot that includes hands and face, an over-the-shoulder shot pointing down, and something random. The reason they encourage these shots is that they will all edit together nicely. So depending upon what type of content you get, you'll easily be able to construct a nice piece out of the material. In addition, I like to also get one extra shot, which I'll call the establishing shot, which could be the exterior of a building, a wide shot of the room, something to introduce you to the scene. It also could be helpful if you need some sort of backdrop for titles, some sort of credit sequence, or maybe an intro shot to the piece. Now, when you're actually out shooting, it's important to hold any given shot for at least 10 seconds. This is referred to as handles. You want to have some extra time at both the beginning and the end of a shot to allow you some flexibility when you're editing for transitions, for holding on a shot, or for creating a certain feeling during a particular scene. As a rule of thumb, you're better off having more footage than less. Okay, now that we've gone out and shot our video and we have all the assets that we need, we are ready for post-production. There's a saying in Hollywood that stories are written 3 times. First, during the pre-production phase when they are actually written. Second, during the production phase when you're doing the actual filming. And The final rewrite happens during the post-production phase when you're editing. This is your last chance to reconstruct and rewrite the story if need be. Now, before you can even start editing, you'll need to pick some sort of software to do this. Any of these are great to work with, and they all basically can do the same thing. For this particular project, you're totally fine with using iMovie, which comes preloaded on Macs, or Camtasia, which you can download for free. Once you've chosen your software, before you can actually start editing your piece together, you need to go through the integral step of media management. And by media management, I mean first importing all of your assets into a project file, then organizing them and labeling them as best as you can, and then reviewing everything that you have. Okay, now we're actually ready to start editing. And I like to break the editorial process down into two main steps. The first step is creating a story edit. Some people refer to it as a radio edit, but essentially you should lay out all the main beats to your story. This includes any narration, any titles, any dialogue or voiceover. Basically, you want to have all the elements that you laid out in your script and your storyboard, and make sure that you have everything there and it's making sense. Once you have a story edit in place, you're ready for what I like to call a polish edit. This includes laying in imagery, adding music, working with the pacing, crafting the piece to make it feel the way you want it to feel. Once you have the polish edit completed, you're ready for the last elements of post-production. And this includes a sound mix. You want to make sure your audio levels are consistent. You don't want one piece of sound really loud and then another piece of sound super soft. So it's important to spend some time balancing out your audio, making sure everything has an even tone and level. Next, it's nice to spend some time doing some color correction. If you can improve the look of some shots, that can really help add some richness to your piece. You might want to brighten them up a little bit to add a happy feeling. Or you might want to darken the tone or take out some of the saturation to give it a little more serious tone. It really depends on you. And lastly, media conversion. You're going to need to factor in some time for rendering any sort of effects, for exporting the video, for converting the format, possibly compressing it for upload. All of those things take time, so definitely factor in some media conversion time into your process. And that concludes getting started with video production for iCore Learning. I really hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing all of you in DC on the 27th.